Kia ora tātou. My name is Matt Lane. I'm sometimes the Customer Experience Manager in Smart Council, but I'm currently on secondment in the Te Matapihi project, which is the new Central Library project. And before I jump into my talk, I'd like to thank Lana, Wilcock, and everyone else who's organised today. I think it's a great idea, and it seems to be running like a well-oiled machine, so thank you very much. So my talk is titled, We're Stupider Than We Look, Getting More Accurate Predictions for Projects by Ignoring Your Project. There we go. So because my talk is kind of bits and bobs all cobbled together, I've made this TLDR of all of the things I'm trying to convince you of in this talk. So the first point is we make unconscious errors of judgment. So we make mistakes and we do so without even knowing that we're doing it, but that these errors are somewhat predictable. The active planning and decision making are inextricably linked with predictions about uncertainty. And we can get better at reducing uncertainty and improving predictions. So mother turkeys are loving and nurturing and protective. They warm and clean and feed and do all the things that good mother turkeys should do. But there's one very odd thing about turkey mothers, and that is that all of this mothering behavior is dependent on a very specific trigger, and that is the sound of a baby chick going cheep, cheep. So if a baby turkey makes the sound cheep, cheep, everything goes very, very well. If baby chicks don't make that sound, mother turkeys will ignore their chicks, and sometimes they'll even kill their chicks. So people who study animal behavior found this very interesting. So they decided they'd run an experiment where they took a replica of a polecat. So the polecat is the natural enemy of the turkey, and they ran an experiment. First, they presented a stuffed polecat to the mother turkey, and as they expected, the turkey attacked it. Next, they put a little recorder inside of the fake polecat, and the recorder played the noise of a baby chick. As soon as that started playing, the mother turkey accepted the polecat into her flock, treated it as one of her own, warmed it, cleaned it, and fed it. As soon as they turned off the recording, the turkey once again would attack the polecat. So the mother turkey's maternal instincts are on autopilot, and the trigger for that autopilot is the sound of the cheep cheep. So now we're going to do a little memory game. If you have a pencil and paper near you, have it handy, but you don't need to use it yet, or a pen and paper, or your phone, you can write things down. I'm going to read a list of words out, and I want you to try to memorize as many of the words as you can. And then when I say go, I want you to write down. So after I've listed the words, I'll take the words away. Then you try to write down as many of them as that you can remember, and then we'll see who's remembered the most. So the words are bed, awake, tired, dream, wake, snooze, blanket, doze, snore, nap, peace, yawn, drowsy, pillow. So I'm now going to give you 45 seconds to try to write down as many of those words as you can remember. 45 seconds starting now. Okay, that's 45 seconds. So now I'm going to go through some words, and and if you did have this word on your list, I'd ask you to put a thumbs up emoji, or no, raise your hand. That's probably the better one. So up the top where it's got reactions, if you can raise your hand if you have this word on your list. Snore. Who had snore on their list? Okay, I'm counting 7 people. Let's say 7 people. So the next one is wake. Who had wake on their list? About 10. Next word is awake. Oh, maybe 12. 12. Nap. 11. And sleep. Who had sleep on their list? Okay, so I'm seeing about somewhere along the lines of 10 to 12 people. Let's say 11 people had sleep on the list, which put it at the second highest reported word. Sleep wasn't on the list. So of the people participating, your brain was trying to be helpful and it was taking shortcuts to save you work. All of these words are associated with the word sleep, but sleep wasn't on the list. So we just created a false memory together. And the point here is we have more in common with the turkey than we like to admit. So this is essentially the premise of the book, thinking fast and slow. There are 2 main systems that work in our brains. We spend 95% of our time in system 1. System 1 is unconscious, fast, associative, and it's our autopilot. That's essentially our turkey brain. System 2 is rational. It takes effort. It's slow, it's logical, it's lazy. So your brain will do everything it can to avoid using system 2. And it's indecisive because it recognizes that things are complicated. So system 1 includes automatic actions, but it also includes some manual actions that we've done so many times that they become automatic. So driving down if you've driven for years and years, driving down a simple street becomes a system 1 activity. When you're learning to drive, it's a system 2 activity. So the point here is, because of system 1 and system 2, we all have unconscious biases. So biases are systematic errors in judgment, and we all use imperfect heuristics. A heuristic is a mental shortcut that we unconsciously use to help solve a problem. This is it's one of my favorite. This is a funny sentence to say. This is one of my favorite diagrams. It's a diagram of all of the cognitive biases and heuristics all grouped together. And so what you can do is you can just search on Google for interesting example of, and then type in any of these phrases and you'll find interesting stuff. So the project planning is at the mercy of these same biases and heuristics. And in fact, you can actually replace project planning with anything else, such as starting a relationship or getting a mortgage or whatever. And so now we're going to go into some specific biases that affect project planning specifically. So optimism bias, and I'm sure everyone's heard of this before. Optimism bias is the tendency to think that the best case scenario is going to play out. There's actually growing consensus from psychologists that optimism bias is a consequence of evolution, which is to say that people who believe that things will go well probably do better in the long term. And when you think about it in a work context, or when I think about it in a work context, the projects get kicked off by optimistic people, and then they attract other optimistic people to join the project. And pessimistic people tend not to kick off projects, and they tend to avoid getting put on complicated projects. So then there's this other one called availability heuristic. So that's the tendency to focus on the information that comes to mind most easily. And when applied to projects, it takes the form of what's called the inside view. So when in the inside view, we focus on our specific circumstances, we gather evidence from our own perspective about the thing we're looking at, and from this we create a plan, and maybe we put in some contingency. But this forecasting is based on the information that's in front of us, and more often than not, It can't think about the unknown unknowns that are coming in the future. And so these two things together lead to something called the planning fallacy. And it's becoming pretty well agreed thing that the planning fallacy is everywhere, and it's a real big problem in almost every single industry. So predicting the future, confidence and uncertainty. Almost everything we do, you can kind of interpret as some form of predicting the future. So we brush our teeth in the morning because we predict tooth decay if we don't. We pack lunches for work because we predict hunger at lunchtime. We put money into KiwiSaver because we predict that one day we're going to live long enough to be retired. And we start projects because in our judgment, we predict that they will lead to an outcome that we want. Different people have different judgments on which future is more likely. We always see competent people disagree with other competent people about things that they are both knowledgeable about. And a simple way, obviously, to manage differing judgments is bets. So if you find someone who thinks something different to you, you can use a bet to resolve that. And when you've got many people betting on something, you have what's called a prediction market. So the TAB is an example of a prediction market, but you can also find prediction markets online for where you can bet on almost anything. So here's one on the screen about, you can see that 92% of people think on this prediction market think that Boris Johnson will still be Prime Minister at the end of May, which you can deduce means that 8% of people on this prediction market think he won't be, which is probably quite massive for a British Prime Minister. So in November of 2016, I had been at the Wellington City Council for 4 months, and we had our first team planning day. And one of the activities we did that day was to create our own little prediction market. We created 10 time-bound assertions, and these assertions included, that for context, this was the day after Trump had just been elected president the first time, God. Oof. I just realized my phrasing. So the assertions included Trump will be elected president a second time in 2020. The Wellington City Council's main website will not be on the content management system Sitecore in November 2019. And the SSO, that's the Shared Services Office, will be dissolved by June 2018. So all of these things were fairly measurable and had a fixed time frame. And each team member could put a percentage of how likely they thought those things were. So we did that in 2016. The last prediction was the Trump one, so that could only be analyzed at November last year. So I can now give you the results of what was a 4-year experiment. We were wrong about most things. Averaged across all of the predictions, our accuracy collectively averaged 43%. So we would have been better off flipping a coin. The best individual predictor, Rudy. Is Rudy on the call? He's not. Anyway, Rudy was the most accurate predictor with an accuracy rate of 52%, slightly better than flipping a coin. And if I was to generalize what mistakes we made, we were more confident or more certain about things that we were more wrong about. So the less we knew about something, the more confident we were about it. The less confident or less certain we were about something, the more right we were. So the more we knew, the less confident we were. And also more desirable outcomes were considered more likely. So this is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know about something, the more you think you know about something. And this can kind of be graphed like this right at the start. Things seem obvious. And I think working at the council, you get this all the time from the outside world. And when someone is sitting at that peak at the start of the graph, you will often hear, this is my personal analysis from years of thinking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think when you hear the word just, you're probably dealing with someone from the Dunning-Kruger family. So I'll say things like, why don't we just, and then they'll say a very, very simple thing that ignores a whole bunch of complexity that you're aware of in your particular area of expertise. I don't understand why they don't just, whatever the simple thing is. Why don't you just try doing that tiny little thing a little bit more? And the point is, the first rule of Dunning-Kruger Club is that you don't know you're in Dunning-Kruger Club. Evaluating judgments. Don't confuse results with the decision. One of the most controversial decisions in Super Bowl history took place in the closing seconds of Super Bowl 49 in 2015. The Seattle Seahawks had 26 seconds to go and were trailing by 4 points. They had the ball and they were right next to the touchdown line of the Patriots. Everybody expected the Seahawks coach to call a running play. They had one of the best running backs in the NFL. Instead, their coach called for their quarterback to pass. New England intercepted the ball and ended up winning the Super Bowl moments later. This is one single headline from the newspapers, but essentially there were dozens and dozens of newspaper headlines that called their coach, Carroll, a moron, an idiot, the worst decision of Super Bowl history. Some slightly more astute analysts pointed out that the interception was extremely unlikely and that you could model its likely outcome somewhere between 0% and 2% likely, which is to say it was an exceptionally unlikely outcome from that play, and that there are a whole bunch of other side benefits of a pass play on a second down next to the touchdown line. But obviously, it didn't work, so it was concluded that it was a bad call. And I think depending on your, well, a statistician or a mathematician or a mathematically inclined strategist would say that that judgment is that the decision was a good decision and the outcome was a bad one. So here's a counterexample. Jeremy attends a friend's barbecue. Jeremy ends up staying later than he had planned, and he drinks many more beers than he intended. He then decides to drive home and concludes because he's already over the limit, he may as well drink another beer on the way home. Jeremy arrives home safely, and no one ever finds out. The point there is that the outcome is a good one. No one got hurt. Jeremy didn't get hurt. But I don't think anyone in the universe would argue that that is a good decision. So often good decisions can have bad results and bad decisions can have good results. And retrospectively judging a decision or action based on the outcome is called outcome bias. So when assessing the quality of judgments, you should look at the judgment in isolation from the outcome. Though there's a slight exception to that. Okay, Bayes' we're at 10:20, perfect. Bayes' raffle tickets. As we buy more tickets, we learn more. This is the good Reverend Thomas Bayes, and he is about to buy some raffle tickets. So all he knows is that there is a raffle. He doesn't know how many tickets are being sold, and he has no idea what percentage of the tickets are winning tickets, right? So right now he really knows very little except for there is a raffle. But he's going to buy a ticket. He buys a ticket, and his first ticket is a winner. So now he knows something, right? He knows some tickets are winners. So maybe none of the tickets are winners. He knows at least one of the tickets are winners. But he can't tell, are all of the tickets winners? Did I just get the 1 in a million winning ticket? So he's learned something, but he doesn't know much. So he's going to buy another ticket. He buys a second ticket, and his second ticket is also a winner. So now he's thinking to himself, either I got exceptionally lucky and I just won the 2 winning tickets of the million or billion or whatever it is, a 2 in a million chance, or maybe they're all winners, or maybe many of them are winners. So what he does is he buys 8 more tickets. He's then got 10 tickets, 5 of them are winners and 5 of them are not. And at this point, he can say to himself, perhaps I got very, 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 very lucky and I got the 5 single winning tickets out of a million, and there are now 999,995 remaining tickets which are not winning tickets, or maybe my collection of 10 tickets indicates some kind of trend that I can kind of deduce from the total population of undrawn raffle tickets. So this is what's called Bayes' theorem, and essentially it's the basis of so much modern statistics and modeling, which is you take the evidence we have, then go backwards to hypothetical paths, and then we can make a pretty good guess about which of those hypothetical paths seems most likely based on the information that we have. As we encounter more information, we can recalibrate our estimates. But for this to work, you need to keep good data. If you can't remember what happened last time, or you have an intuition as to how this thing always goes, it's really hard to make accurate predictions. And by the way, the raffle tickets could be analogous to 12+1 projects. So reference class forecasting. Here's the answer to all of our problems. Reference class forecasting. So did you know that the best industries in the world manage to deliver 30% of projects on time, on budget, and to the benefits promised? So that's to say the best industries have a failure rate, if you judge failure being not on time, not on budget, and not doing all the things that it said it was going to do, of 70%. Maybe you wouldn't call that a failure. Maybe you say not a perfect success, but nonetheless, 30% is the highest you can get. Some industries are as low as 10% success rate for projects. That's not limited, and it's not even limited to large project industries. They've detected the planning fallacy in stockbrokers, electrical engineers, doctors, postgraduate students, people doing Christmas shopping, people filling out their taxes. We're just not very good at estimating how long something's going to take and how good the outcome is going to be when we do it. So what do we do about it? Reference class forecasting is the idea that we collect data about the category of thing we're talking about, our reference class, and then we heavily adjust our estimates based on the average of that reference class. So if we look here on this diagram, if you're building a tunnel in the UK and you've worked out your estimates on when you think it's going to be done and what it's going to cost, there's a 56% chance that you're going to go over time, and there's a 74% chance of going over cost, over budget. So this is actually exactly how the UK Treasury insists on all public sector projects being run in the UK. So this is their green book. The green book is all the rules and guidance that large scale projects have to be run in the UK public sector. And this is their supplementary guidance on optimism bias. And this is their they don't call it this, but it's their reference classes to adjust your forecasts to. So if you are building a non-standard civil engineering project, you would adjust you have to adjust downwards, accounting for an optimism bias of 66%. So those are the base rates that you adjust your expectations to. But for this to work, we need to keep good data of past projects. The UK's Green Book project balancing has been happening since 2004. So that's 2004 sounds like a long time, but it's actually quite a short time for large-scale construction projects, because obviously large-scale construction projects in cities have been going on for hundreds of years. But they're comparing it to since 2004 compared to the previous 50 years, I think it was. They think that this is causing a massive reduction in overtime over budget, and that's, you can also reading between the lines, is because they're adjusting upwards what their time predictions are and what their cost predictions are. And the last part, this kind of didn't fit in anywhere, but I think it's important to say, is that precision and accuracy are not the same thing. So often we think that you want to be precise and accurate, and what we end up doing is we end up being precise but inaccurate. So we give an estimate which is 12 hours or 12 months or whatever it is, And the point is that if you broaden what your target, instead you talk about a range instead of a precise number, you can be much more accurate. So to be more accurate, be less precise. So broaden, talk about ranges as opposed to precise numbers. So going back to the TLDR, we often make unconscious errors of judgment, but these errors are somewhat predictable. The act of planning and decision making is inextricably linked with predictions about uncertainty, and we can get better at reducing uncertainty and improving predictions. And I've made a cheat sheet. So if you don't read anything else, you can just print this one off and stick it by your desk or tattoo it on your arm. Make projects or pieces of work smaller. So if it's going to fail faster, fail cheaper. It lets you hedge bets as well. If you don't have all your chips in one basket, you can have multiple things happening at once. And it also, if you think of the difference between TikTok and YouTube, so one of the ways that TikTok outsmarted YouTube is by making shorter videos. So they now probably have comparable data to 15 years of YouTube, and TikTok's only been around for a few years, just because more people are doing more things more often, so they can analyze how they're going faster. Keep better data on how things go. Use past data to make more accurate predictions for future work. Recognize this is uncomfortable, that luck and noise affect individual outcomes. So for an individual project, luck and noise will be really, really important, but across a large population of projects, luck and noise fades away and you get something resembling a normal curve. And this is kind of my challenge for us, is we should change our vocabulary to be more about potential outcomes, levels of confidence, chances, and ranges. So avoid trying to be precise, and this is both to individuals and managers, team leaders, decision makers. Be more comfortable with the phrase "I don't know" or "I'm not sure" or "it's probably between this and this." I think these are healthy things we can do to have more honest and more accurate conversations. And that is the end of my talk. And then there's some links there to some interesting reading and videos if you are interested. That number one there is a podcast episode, and it's my favorite. I've listened to it probably 10 times, and it's really, really, really good. Thank you for listening to me. And it's now 10:29.